right, just wait a couple moments here to let everyone in, and we will start at 7. Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for part 3 of our Discover Refinishing series with Kristin Leah. Tonight's session is all about mastering finishes, including wood wax, oil stain, and Pollux-oil tints. Whether you've been with us from the start or you're just tuning in rather for the first time, we're excited to have you here. I'm going to now turn it over to Kristin, and she's going to walk us through how to get the best results from some of her favorite products.
Hi, hard to believe that this is our third webinar already. My name is Kristin and I'm with Kristin Leah Restoration. So next Thursday is our last one and it's going to be all about protecting your finish. So make sure you head over to canadianwoodworking.com to register. And if there's going to be questions, please put them in the chat and the moderators will do their best to answer. And if there's anything they think is of significant importance that they think the whole group would like to know, Victor will let me know. Otherwise, let's get started. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with finish. I have kind of alluded to this in the past webinars, but when I first started, I had no idea that you put stain on and then you wiped it off. Literally, I had no idea. And so for the first few years, I didn't own a sander. And so what I would do is I would scuff sand and then use General Finishes gel stain to put a layer over top. Essentially, it's kind of like painting with stain because it doesn't penetrate into the wood that way. And so, in fact, I remember that I applied gel stain to this table and I was like, I don't need to wipe it. I mean, it's going to be on this table. If I leave it on, it'll dry and it'll just be a more like intense color. Fast forward 3 weeks and it still wasn't dry. This is what it looked like. You can see the before and after. Definitely not my proudest moment. And I went back to the painted bench with Melanie and was like, I don't understand why my finish isn't drying. And then I was honestly too embarrassed to tell her what actually happened. And fast forward now, 6 years later, and I have definitely learned my lesson. So with all the different techniques I showed you last week, from scraping to sanding and stripping, my goal is always to expose as much wood as possible. There's so much character all the time in these different woods. I have tried a lot of different finishes and there are a lot of great ones out there, but by far my favorite finish is Osmo. But that's to say whatever works for me might not be what works for you. So there are so many different types of finishes to try, and it's up to you to figure out which one you like the best. So how I got started with Osmo. I had a friend who was really sensitive to off-gassing. And what off-gassing is the chemicals that are released in the air from the products that you use. She was really sensitive to that. And then after doing some research, I discovered Osmo. So this might sound like an advertisement. It is not. If you go to any of my social media platforms, you can see that I've been using them, I would say for the past 3 years now. It's like once I find something that I like, I just stick with it. I feel sometimes no need for change, but in this case, there are so many reasons why I love it. So the first thing is that their products are low VOCs. So VOCs are volatile organic compounds, fancy words for saying what the chemicals are. And so they are non-toxic and they have very minimal off-gassing. So instead of it being something that is, in the air for weeks, with Osmo, it's only in the air for a couple of days. And so what is good about this is that I restore pieces so I love this. Okay, sorry. For both the pieces that I restore, but most importantly for my health and for the health of the people in my household, Victor and the dogs. Because I refinish in the basement, I need to protect my lungs. And this is something that, especially we talked about last week, that I have asthma. Having something that is not very potent to my lungs at all makes a huge difference. There's a huge rabbit hole you can go down in this, but today is not that day. The other reason why I like them, I mean, this is probably way down their list of why their products are amazing, but up here for me is because their open time is 20 minutes, meaning I can go apply this, apply the finish, and then when I see Jack's dog hair in it, because I always let him in the shop, I want to make sure that he is like that I can pick out the dog hair and then, you know, re-roll it over top. It makes it so much easier for me that way that I don't have to think that I'm ruining the entire finish. Um, all of their products are non-toxic and can be used on surfaces like food preparation and kids' toys. I have a niece and a nephew, and I want to make sure that anything that I'm doing for them, they're 3-in-1. So they're going to like put stuff in their mouth that shouldn't be in their mouth. I want to make sure that there's nothing toxic that or anything that can affect them that I'm giving them. Their formulas are eco-friendly, and so they're made of natural vegetable oils and waxes. Again, this just goes to the non-toxic. Their products are all made in Germany and then shipped over here. When I'm applying, sometimes I wear gloves. It's not because I need to like protect my hands from the chemicals in it. It's mainly so that I don't get my hands full of product. That's essentially it. But it's not necessary. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different Osmo products. I made this fancy chart, this board here. Oh, there we go. So the first one that, so there's 4 different products that I use to enhance the color and protect the pieces that I'm refinishing. So there's wood wax finish, there's oil stain, and Pollux, I say Pollux-oil tints. These have some sort of pigment in them. Osmo uses natural earth pigments. If I want to keep the color of the wood more natural, I will use Pollux-oil clear. I love working with walnut. That is probably my most favorite wood. And so if I can showcase as much of that beauty as I can, that's what I'm going to focus on. So you can see there's different ones here, different sheens, the matte here. We're going to get into a little bit more of these right now. So I'm going to grab the wood wax finish first. So Osmo Wood Wax Finish has double the amount of the pigment of the tints. So we'll go back to it, but you can kind of see like that the Pollux-oil tints is about half here of the pigment that the wood wax finish is. And so the wood wax finish does include a top coat for minimal wear surfaces. If I'm doing something like a dresser, you really would only have to make sure, say the top has extra protection, but I end up putting it on the whole thing so that it has like a uniform looking finished result to it. When I use this, I am looking to do an intense color. So this is sometimes because I've done repairs, like if for example, I did a teak dresser, and normally I would have liked to have the teak be the star of the show. It was so damaged that I needed to use the walnut wood filler to repair the sides. But when I did that, I needed to camouflage those repairs, and the walnut wood wax finish does that. So there's an example of what it looks like. You can see that side so damaged, the front there. And so that color of teak is not typically what the teak color would be, but because I had to do so many repairs, I had to kind of pivot. And that's what refinishing is all about. Refinishing is about not every piece is going to sand the same. There's going to be things that you didn't know you had to fix. And it's about kind of taking what you're given and then at each step, making sure that you can problem solve to have the best result. Yes, I would have loved to have teak be the star of the show of that original color, like of the color of the teak wood. But because of that damage that I had to fix, there was no way that I could leave it that way. So we're going to talk about next is the oil stain. So the oil stain here is wonderful. I will show you an example that I just did last night as a test board. This is only a stain, so there is no top coat included in this. You'll always want to make sure that you add another layer of protection on top. When you apply this oil stain, I don't use it as much as I use the other ones just because I I just haven't used it as much. I like using ones that already have a finish built into it. It just makes it a little bit easier for me when I'm layering. We'll talk about that next week for kind of the final, protection part. But applying a single coat of the oil stain will create a transparent look, and then the second one will show a more opaque look. So if we look at this board here, you can see that this is one coat of the oil stain, and then this is two. The thing is, with all of Osmo's products, when you're applying, you can control the level of product left on the surface by the application method that you're using. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but instead of putting a product on and then wiping off and then doing that again until you get your desired color, the different application methods leave a little bit of different amounts of product on the surface. And so for this, I used a brush to apply and I didn't wipe off any excess. And so I brushed it on, I brushed it on the whole thing. I let this dry for 12 hours. And then I put a piece of tape down the middle. I applied this one just this morning. And then what I did was let this dry for 12 hours, and you can see the difference. The elm grain is much more apparent here. This color has a little bit more opacity, so it's a little bit harder to see into. Okay, so that's the oil stain. So Pollux-oil tints just actually came to Canada a couple of years ago. And what this is that it has half the pigment that the wood wax finish has, but it has the same kind of top coat that the Pollux-oil does. We're going to talk about Pollux-oil next week amongst a couple of other different ways you can protect your top coat. But Pollux-oil is a way that they use it in some airport floors. Like, that's how durable it is. And so with this, adding that little bit of color, that little touch, gives you a little bit of a way to introduce a little bit of color, but not as intense as the wood wax finish. So for example, I recently refinished a mahogany bedroom set. And because the mahogany bedroom set has a little bit more of the reddish tone, you can see here the before and after. Really red, looked like a crime scene when I stripped all that finish off. You can see that the actual mahogany wood has, it has still a little bit of a red tone. And what my friend wanted was a little bit of that red to remain, but they also wanted a little bit more of a brown tone. So instead of using the walnut wood filler or the walnut wood wax finish, I used the Pollux-oil tints in honey. You can see that there, it still has a little bit of those red undertones, and so that the tones in the Pollux-oil tints interact with the natural color of the wood, which is the red, and created this beautiful color. Okay. And then, so this is another one. It's kind of part of the tints line, but it's called Osmo Pollux-oil Raw. I adore this. What I love about this is that, I'm gonna open it up. You can see here that it is lightly tinted with white. And so because it's lightly tinted with white, it keeps your light wood pieces, so a pine or a maple. You can see it on this board here. It keeps it looking raw, like it keeps it looking that light wood color. What often happens is when you're using an oil on a light wood surface, if you put it on directly, it turns it a little bit yellow. So because that this is tinted with that little bit of white, there's not as much difference here that you can see between the, the sanded color and the Pollux-oil Raw. So I use this on a V-last dresser, and you can see here from the before and then the middle and then the after, just how it kept that light wood looking light. That is the goal. There's, everybody wants white oak right now because then they want to keep it this color. I used to use a paint wash a lot, and a paint wash, what you would do is you would get a paint. I would use, like, say, Country Chic Paints, one of theirs. Driftwood was one that I would use a lot, and I would do like 1 part of paint to 5 to 10 parts of water, depending on it. I would mix it together. I would use a paintbrush to paint it on and wipe it off as I went along. The problem is that's not very consistent. So when it dried, often it looked a little splotchy in places. You could never tell how it would interact with the color of the wood. And this is, I found, a much more consistent way to keep the color uniform across the entire surface and not have certain areas, pick up a little bit more paint here because it wasn't completely stirred than the other parts. Okay. One of the other amazing features about Osmo is that you can mix colors. And so they do suggest keeping it within the same line. So Pollux-oil tints with Pollux-oil tints, or you could do, some of the times I have put in like a little bit of wood wax finish with the Pollux-oil, just because like say the one I use, Oak Antique, all the time, sometimes I find it really dark, but I like the tone of it. So I can add some Pollux-oil. Usually it's a 10 to 20% ratio. So you would, I'm not very scientific. I wish I could say that I used like one of those little, syringes or measuring things. I literally go 1, 2, 3, like I count to 10 on one thing and count to 2 on the other thing. That's how it works for me. You want to make sure that the dry times are, I always go with the highest dry time. So Pollux-oil the normal clear is 8 to 10 hour dry time, whereas the wood wax finish is 12 hours, and then the Pollux-oil tints is 24 hours. You want to make sure that I always just respect the highest dry time that they have. One thing that you want to know about the Pollux-oil tints is you can do a maximum of 2 layers of that. So say you saw it and you just needed a little bit more color, you could always add a second layer, but they say the max is 2. So I'm going to show you, I love doing testing. When I did that mahogany set, I did testing on the bottom just to make sure that I could get the same tone that the bottom wood had, that the veneer on the mahogany had, and we got pretty close. Excuse me. So last year, I decided to save 2 sets of a set of 2 end tables. I knew that they were elm underneath. I had to save them, but I don't know what I was thinking. They are so blue, and the more I got into doing it, the more I regretted my life choices, to be honest. It was so much, but you can see on the sanded part that they did turn out beautifully. That's before I applied the stain. So Victor, next slide, please. So you'll see here that I did a lot of color testing. I think there's 18 different combinations that I used. I used these little, I forget what they're called. They're like little droppers that you can use. I made sure to mark down. But what I realized when I was doing that, so I found one, I picked it. I picked that cognac and walnuts wood wax finish mixture. What I found was when I applied it to the actual set of end tables, I used a roller. Whereas when I was testing, I used a brush. And so what you'll see in a couple minutes when we talk about the end tables is that the color left behind, it is beautiful. And honestly, it is better than the blue. So I am totally fine with it. But I would have liked it to be a little bit lighter. And it gave me that, taught me that lesson to make sure to always test with what I'm going to be using as my application method. Okay. Now we're getting into the fun part, the different application methods and then how to do them. So I'm going to put up this chart here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about durability, but next week we're going to talk more about that and sort of the layers of protection and things that you're going to need. But as I set up here, I'm just using a walnut or a maple veneer here so that you can see a little bit more of the contrast. So one of the first application methods, I'm just going to put all of these stuff here. Do we have any questions so far? Anything that we need to address while I'm setting all of this up? No? I mean, either y'all just don't want to say anything or you're really understanding me. So let's hope it's the latter in that case. So the first application method is that I always love is using a roller. So I briefly talked about how with Osmo, you don't have to wipe the finish. I mean, I am so frugal. This is the way my life goes, is that I want to make sure that I'm using everything that I can. Let's put these ones out. Everything that I can to the best that I can use it. And so when I'm doing this, I'm your whole project, you need 60 grams per meter squared. I just like going by the grams. So 60 grams of the finish left on the surface. This is over multiple coats. And so I did a really fun video called Osmo Math that we'll send out to you because I'm silly and goofy, as you know, and I decided to make it a lot more easy to remember how many grams are left by each different product. So with a roller, you're going to take, I just use a roller frame. You're going to put this microfiber roller on here like this. Anytime you're using an Osmo product, you want to make sure that you stir it really well. Anything that has a pigment in it is going to settle at the bottom. And so I'm making sure to give it a really good stir. And then I'm just going to pour into the tray here. Usually when I'm doing furniture, I'm using a combination of both using a brush for the edges and a roller for all of the flat surfaces. It can be really hard to roll over a handle and making sure it's even. So that's where I usually use the brush. And a roller leaves behind 60 grams of product. See, like something like this, I just get finish all over myself. And then we wonder why I don't have nice clothes because then I'm like, I'm just going to wipe it on my pants. I've been told I'm not allowed to leave the house in stained clothes anymore. I mean, something I should have learned like years ago. And so I always just use the brush to wipe off the excess there. We'll use the brush next. And so when you're using the roller, what you want to make sure that you're doing is that you're completely saturating it. So like really you can make it so it's like dripping off. But then what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're rolling out as much of that as possible. You're doing this so it's almost dry. That's essentially what you want it to look like. And when you're doing this, you can go all directions. You can go side to side, la la la. But then in the end, you want to finish with these kind of long, even strokes with the grain. I like going sometimes across the grain like this just to make sure that it all gets in there. But I mean, you don't want to over roll it, but different than like if you're using a normal stain, you can work it too much. I'm all about like ease and efficiency, and this is way easier for me. And so I'm just gonna move this for a minute. And then so when I'm done, I'm doing these kind of, I'm not even pushing down. So you can see when I'm doing this, I'm not like squishing this because then look what happens, right? Like you can even see that's probably even too much product that's still left on there. So what I'm doing is I can do this, I can fix that. I can just see this piece of dog hair here, take that out. And then what you don't want to see is, you can see these lines here. While Osmo is self-leveling, you want to make sure that you're leaving behind as smooth a surface as you can. So I'm lightly dragging this across. I am not pushing down. These can only be used like for one application, meaning like one whole project. So if I'm going to do a whole project and I'm using this roller for say the first coat of, if it's wood wax finish or the Pollux-oil tints, I will reuse this roller for the Pollux-oil clear, because it'll give a little bit, like it'll take a little bit of what this pigment is in here, but for the most part, if you have stirred it in enough, it will be fine. So that is how you use the microfiber roller. in between coats with the roller, I just store it in a Ziploc bag. I put this whole tray and I just whoop, put in these extra large Ziploc bags that I get from the dollar store, and that's it. I keep using the same ones. I have a bag. I think I already put it away. But this is what I used for that. Okay, so I'm gonna put this here. The one thing that I just remembered that I should have talked about is just making sure before you put anything on your surface, probably would have helped before I decided to do this, is making sure you use a tack cloth to wipe your surface clean. That would have taken off all of the dog hair that I had on here. So what I'm gonna do is you lightly drag this across. Again, with the tack cloth, you're not pushing down. You're just lightly dragging it across here. That's how easy that is. But if there was something that you missed, if there was something that you didn't sand properly on here, you would have noticed that it would have been very, very apparent on this. It would have not absorbed that stain. It would have just kind of like made it look like a lighter area. The next thing we're going to do, there's two different, oops, yep, there we go. There's my life. There's two different brushes that I usually use. Osmo is affiliated with a company called Elite, and they make great tape, to be honest, and these brushes. And so these are the sizes I like using, mainly because they're easier to control. So if I'm using this, I can really get up into a corner. I can make sure that I am, really getting in there, but I also, I have more control because of how I'm holding it. So this is a round one. This is a more of a square one, not square, more rectangle. This is the standard one. It doesn't really matter what you use, as long as you use something. And so there are two ways you can use the brush. If I was gonna already had some of this in the tray, I could dip it in the tray. And so I could go like this. I would make sure that I'm kind of dabbing out and taking out as much on the side. So if I like gooped it on, you do not want it looking like that. So I'm going to kind of take out as much as possible, and then I'm going to run it across the edge. You can see all of that finish really coming out there. And the thing is with Osmo that a little goes a long way. I did that and I poured in way more than I actually needed when I was doing that test elm board. So then when you're doing this, again, any direction you want, but you want to make sure that you're finishing with long, even strokes. So I always put in less and then get more. Let's put this under here so that I don't get this all over, not my workbench. And so I can always layer it if I find that, when I wake up the next morning. One of the things that people find a little challenging about Osmo is the wait time. And so when you have some products that are good to go in an hour versus this that you have to wait, 12 hours essentially overnight, it becomes a lot more attractive to do the one that you can do over in that amount of time, right? In the 1 hour. But because this is a hobby for me, I like making sure like that I give myself like kind of work within my limitations, but then also that I'm giving the product time to do its thing. I want to make sure that I am letting it cure properly because I know what the end result can look like that way. So again, with this, you can see that I'm just less is more. So you won't be able to tell during this webinar, like what the full effect is, only because once it dries, it can change. But with this, what you're kind of wanting to make sure that you're doing is kind of feathering it so that you don't have like in the middle, there's this like awful line right now, right? So you kind of want to make sure that you're just lightly working that in. And then there you go. Next week, when we talk about protecting the finish, we'll talk about what you do in between the finishes and what you should and should not be using. Okay, so even there, I'm gonna put this somewhere else, over here. So you can even see when I'm doing this here, I'm going to hold this up. You can see the difference that each of these sides has. So you can see with the roller here, how much more product got left behind on the surface than the brush did. That one looks like really, you can really tell the difference. Just wait to see when you use a cloth and you end up kind of wiping it all off. It looks incredible, the difference. Okay, let's put this over here. Okay. When I'm done with the brush, what I typically do is I leave it in the bag with it, in the bag with all these other things. So when I do the second coat, I can use it. But when I'm done with it, I put it in a jar of the Osmo brush cleaner, and it's a thinner too, but I'd never use it for that. And I put it in there, let it soak. And then after, I usually leave it in for the day, but after that, I will make sure that I kind of brush it up against the edges. And then I make sure to, I just use Dawn dish soap after I've squeezed out the excess that way. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to use, you just want to make sure that you don't leave it out, because it will dry out and then your brush is toast. So we don't want that to happen. The next step on our kind of durability chart, so again, you can see it on here. I probably should have dusted it before I did this, but such is the life of a refinisher. Your shop is covered in dust. So again, this is the roller. This is the brush. So the roller leaves on 30 grams per meter squared, and the brush leaves on 20 grams per meter squared. The next one we're going to talk about is the fleece applicator. So this is what the fleece applicator looks like. It comes in a package like this. It is a one-time use. Again, like it's not like you can clean it when you're done with the project, but one-time use meaning one-time project. As you're doing it, you don't have to like change it out between every single step. So when you take it out of the package, you attach it to their pad holder. It has this like hook and loop background to it. So again, you can see I use things until they're almost garbage, but until they are garbage, I do not do that. And so I make sure to put it on here. You can see on the back part that I've really attached this pad holder to it. This again also alleviates you having to get your fingers dirty trying to hold it. I mean, I'm sure that there'd be something else that you could do. And so when I'm doing this, I'm getting this everywhere. Again, you could dip it in the, put it in the tray that you're using. Otherwise, I always just give it a stir. I take the stir stick, and what I do here is I kind of give it a stir, and then I smear a little bit on. I am not fancy, so I take a little bit here, smear it on. Okay, a little bit more. And as you are spreading it around the surface, you'll find that it will kind of incorporate into the whole entire pad. I'm going to start with this side because I already got finish on it. And when you're doing this, you can see here how easy it is. And again, you can go in any direction as long as you finish with these long strokes with the green. You can see it slowly working through that whole pad there, but I can see that it's also drying out. So I'm going to take a little bit more here of the product. I'm going to put a little bit more right on the middle. And again, it all depends on how big of a surface that you're working with. I know that I'm only doing this little bit. If I was doing like a huge part, I would make sure to put a lot more on.
You have a question?
Oh, sure.
So question is, do you ever wipe on finish instead of using a roller or a brush? If yes, how does the amount of stain compare to the other methods?
So if you're going to talk about like using a cloth, we have something like this called an easy cloth. You could use like a blue shop towel, or like we talked about in the first webinar, the like a sponge. I don't ever do that because I know that within using one of these application methods, I can get the level of transparency that I'm looking for. I'm going to just finish this really quick and then I will show you that board again. You can see here that I didn't, yes?
And what was the brand for the fleece?
All of these ones are Osmo. Yeah, these are all Osmo. You can see, okay, we'll go back to the question in just a second, but you can see here, I didn't sand this first. And you can see here how there's these different kind of splotches. It's maple. Maple is notoriously splotchy in general. That's why like those sometimes dining sets are really hard to do because usually it's just really hard to do maple. It's a really hard wood, so they don't accept the oil as well. But I will show you here. So if I knew that in the end, I wanted my finish. So this all here is the same finish that I'm using, this oak antique. And so if I knew that I really wanted a vibrant finish, I know that I would use the roller like this. And then I would do one coat, I would get the color that I wanted, and then I would put clear on top to make sure that I'm building that durability. Whereas if I knew I wanted the oak antique color, but I didn't want it as severe or as dark as this, I would say use a super pad, or I would use an easy pad like a cloth to wipe it on and then wipe it off. And then that way I'm not wasting as much product. So if I mean, you could use the roller, put it on like this, and then wipe it off, but essentially you're wasting half of your product because it's all going to end up in your cloth. And so that's why you can control the level of transparency that you have based on what application method you use. Then that way you're using less product and then you're saving your money because I mean, it's an investment. You could go to, one of the other stores and see brands that are a little bit cheaper, but I know that the durability of this is so important and it's so great that it's worth investing that money into, and you don't want to be wiping away half of it when you could be saving it for future projects. So that gives it a little bit here. So let's just hold up. I'm going to do this other side first, and then we will compare, because that one's had a little bit of time to dry, well, a few minutes, versus what it will look like after this with these other ones. So with this fleece applicator, again, you could use it for multiple coats. You could use it. It's really easy to use. Like all of these things are very beginner friendly. It seems a little daunting at first sometimes to have, use a roller. What do I do? But after you do it a few times, it does become second nature. So again, you just take this off. Really important, anytime you're using a product that has the product, or using a applicator that has the product on it, if you're going to be throwing it out, please do not just throw it in the garbage. You either want to lay it flat. I have one on my floor right now that you want to lay flat to dry. Otherwise, you want to soak it in water, because any products like this that have any bit of chemical in it, if they are all crunched up, they can generate heat, and then your house can catch on fire and then you can die. So like a long stretch that way, but I've seen people who's, I'm ridiculous, I know. I've seen people who've had their porch destroyed because of that. In the Hamilton Spectator last week, there was someone who was doing lacquer in their basement, and the pilot light from their water heater made their house catch on fire, and there was $500,000 in damage. So one thing is you want to be very careful. The next thing is an Osmo Super Pad. And what the Osmo Super Pad does is it is usually used for buffing. I use it as the last step of my project to make sure it gets into all of my wood grain pores. It comes in a full package like this. Again, I am frugal, so I take it out, I cut it in half, and I just make sure that I don't drag the ass end of it on the board when I'm doing it. So usually you just make sure you lay it flat like this. You just don't drag it, or else that happens. When you're using it to apply product, I do it in the same way that I did the fleece applicator. These already have a stain on them, right? I think they already have a stain on them. We're gonna go with that. And again, I just smear it on. I don't think I've ever used this to actually apply product because I like the full force of the pigments that are offered. And when you're doing this, you're trying to do these gentle circles. That's, again, way too much product. If that ever happens, then you just take like a towel. I use blue shop towels for this. You just kind of squeeze some of it out. Like you can see already how much that holds in there. And so you're doing these gentle circles with the oil until it's all absorbed into the surface. There we go. And then again, I'm just finishing with these long strokes with the grain. You just want to make sure that you're not leaving behind, oh, there's a piece of wood in there. Some of the stuff on the edges sometimes, but as long as you've kind of feathered your way through it, just like that, you can see that it is applied to the whole thing, but not, there's no blobs or smears anywhere, all sort of blended in. So let's do a brief check-in. Again, you also, if you're using this for Pollux-oil at the end, you don't want to keep it upside down like this because all of the product will drain into here and then your thing ends up looking like that. So, easier for that. So I think I can put this in here. There we go. This table is so useful. And now I'm going to put this on top. So let's see if I can. Oh, God. Okay, sorry. Wrong way. I'm going to come around this way for a second. I have to see which ones I'm looking at. Okay, so you can see the roller is the top left. The brush is the right. I'm going to see if I can do this without getting stuff all over myself. And then the bottom left is the super pad, and the bottom right is the fleece applicator. So once they dry, you can see that this one here is the lightest one.
Can you explain that again? We accidentally cut to the card.
Oh, okay.
Just explain which one is which again.
Okay, so the top left here is the roller. And again, this leaves 30 milligrams of product on your, or 30 grams of product on your surface. This one here is the brush. This leaves behind 20 grams. So you can see the stark difference between these two. This fleece applicator is that side. I feel like if I do this side here is the fleece applicator. And what that does is you can't really tell a huge difference between this and this. There's only 5 milligrams difference. So if you say this is 30, this is 20, this is 15, this side on here is 10. Oh, I guess that doesn't help that there's this blue cloth in the middle of it. Sorry, guys. There you go. So, I mean, you can see it on the other board that I have a little bit easier, but, and then the last one that we're going to do is the easy cloth or easy, what is it called? An easy cloth, easy pad. I have to check that. And so this is your traditional wipe on easy pad. I knew that. I don't know where my brain goes sometimes. And so this is one, see, this is what happens to your hands. It gets all dirty. This is the traditional method that you would normally see. So you would take this, you would dip it in here, you kind of remove some of this excess, and then you would smear it all in. Okay. You can probably open it up a little bit, making sure you're getting it in all the spots. Again, you probably would want to wear gloves living on the edge today. Okay, so you're rubbing it in here. So we're okay. So then what you would do, this is an easy pad is huge. Like if you're thinking about what it looks like typically, that's what it looks like. I cut it into 4 pieces because it makes it a little bit easier for me. But traditionally, if you were going to use a different stain, you would put the stain on, you would take your blue shop towel, and then you would just wipe off the excess like that. Okay. Oh, that was full of stain from something else. Okay. So let's recap again. So in general, you want 60 grams of product left on the surface. Okay, we're going to start with this one. The roller right here leaves behind 30 grams of product. Okay. You have to consider this. We'll talk about layering and the durability next week, but if you want 60 grams of product, you're going to go 30 grams of this and then probably 30 grams I would roll the next coat as well. Okay, so then you have the brush beside it, that's 20. And so again, I'm always using a combination of these because you can't get everywhere with a roller that way. Okay, so you have the next one you have, oh my goodness, I feel like a teacher, is the fleece applicator on this side here. This side here is 15 grams of product left on the surface. And then the super pad. So this is the super pad. I'm just going to put this like this so you can see it. That's the fleece applicator. The fleece applicator 15, the easy pad or the super pad is 10. And so I always finish with 10 with this buffing just because I find it really helps it to get in all of those wood grain pores in case the roller or the brush missed anything. I'm going to get this on myself anyway. Awesome. Let's move this out of the way first. And then finally, the last one we have is the cloth. And I mean, even between these ones, I feel like you can see the difference of how much lighter this bottom one is here versus the top ones. And so if you're looking for the color to be like this, amazing. You only need to rub it in with the cloth and then you're not wasting all of that product. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit more intense, there are several different other options that you can use. Okay, let me just put these down here so that we get them out of the way. Look at that. I didn't even have to use any notes for any of those things. That's how often I talk about them on when I'm explaining the processes for all of my pieces. Okay, so my final thoughts. Before we get into some questions, we have like 13 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we are getting to all of them. Oh, I did just do that. Okay, so I usually do a few projects at a time. I like having everything at kind of the same stage, so I'll sand a few dressers first. And then that way all the sanding is done. Then I can clean all the rest of them. And then it's time to apply the finish. And then that way I'm only using one of these rollers. I'm only using one of these pads, whatever I usually use. So I'm usually doing a couple of coats with the roller and the brush, and then I always finish with the buffing. But so I'm only using one roller. I only have to clean one brush. I only have to use one fleece applicator or the easy pad. And when I'm doing this, like it's the mindset that I take when I'm refinishing is that it's all about the environment. Yes, I'm saving the piece of furniture. Oh God. But also I want to be cognizant of the supplies I'm using. If I'm going through so much extra stuff to make sure that I'm refinishing the piece properly, like that's also not great for the environment. Question.
Yep, so do you ever use a pre-stained sealer?
I typically do if I haven't had to do that with the Osmo stuff, but if I'm using like a General Finishes, a different kind of stain, like a different brand of stain, I will, especially on a piece like maple. I recently did Victor's daughter's kitchen table, and I don't know if I knew I didn't sand properly, but also maple is notoriously blotchy. So that's something that I should have done that way. Yes.
And then speaking of blotches, if you have them, is there a way to fix them?
Oh, great question, because with Osmo, you don't have to resand the entire piece. Talk about trying to make my life easier for me. When you're doing this with Osmo, you can only do this, you only have to do that one area. I wish I didn't have a picture of it because I wanted to talk about it next week, but I will next week, so tune in for that. I did a friend's dresser, and I sanded it all, applied the finish, and then I guess I didn't realize, or she didn't realize either, that her dad must have spilled cologne or something on it first. And so when I was able to fix it, all I had to do was literally use like I have Surf Prep sanding pads that I just sand that spot, and then I could just apply Osmo over the whole thing, and it was amazing. It doesn't blister, it doesn't crack, it doesn't peel. I can't say enough good things. Yes.
So 60 grams is the max or minimum to try to apply to a piece? Or is it all about the level of finish we think looks best?
So in terms of the color, that's up to you. But in the end, you want to have 60 grams of product on the surface for maximum durability. So I didn't get too much into that, but like if you find your maximum durability, like say you love the color of the roller, the way that the roller leaves it behind, and that's 30, right? So that's 30, 60 minus 30 is 30. There's the mathlete in me. But if you were to use an easy pad, 60 minus 5 is 55. You know you're getting a mathlete today. And so you're going to want to make sure that you build up the other levels using the Pollux-oil clear up to that 60 grams. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. Yes.
How can you stop Pollux from coagulating? Any tips when that happens?
Like in the can?
Yeah.
In the can. You just have to make sure that it's sealed really well. That your lid is completely on. I just did that with the Pollux-oil raw. I haven't used that in a little while. I think you just want to make sure that you keep using it. And if it does kind of coagulate on top, it'll usually just do like a little bit of a layer on top or like a skin. And so what I used is I just used the stir stick to kind of mix it around and then pick up those parts and throw them in the garbage.
Okay, we have another question. After applying the product
Yep.
with whichever applicator, and you discover you need to go darker,
Yep.
do you apply additional coats? Do you switch applicators to realize a darker stain with the additional coats?
Yep. It'll all depend. Like if you look at it and you're like, that is way too light for me, then you'd want to just use, say, a roller to make it a lot darker, or you could use a brush, and then that way you can kind of control it a little bit more. And then that way, if you find when you're putting it on with the brush and you're like, that is just way too dark, you can wipe it off. So that gives it a little bit more kind of play that way.
And then one more question. Can you just recap what the cleanup process is for the brushes or spills or whatever?
Sure. So when you just saw what I did there, I, again, hate wasting product. So I literally took this off the edge here and I poured it back into the can. And that's what I did for this. Again, how I'm frugal is that I don't like wasting product. And so what I find is if I let this dry for like, usually overnight, but if I were to let this dry, I could put a clear Pollux-oil on top of this and none of this color would get onto the roller. And so I typically use these several times just so that I'm not wasting it. I mean, you want to make sure that you're getting the most out of your products.
What do you clean the brushes with?
Oh, Osmo brush cleaner and thinner. Here, look at this for 1 second while I have a brief interlude and get that. Pretend you're listening to some Jeopardy music at the present time. Do do do. Okay, I'm back. This looks like really gross, but whoops, this is how my life goes. So I have this jar from Country Home Candle, and I have the Osmo cleaner in it, this brush cleaner and thinner. And so I've had this one. I actually just used this today to do the elm board. But what I would do to clean it is I would kind of push it up against the sides like this. I would make sure that I take off all of this. You'll find the more you use the same jar, the solids from it collect at the bottom. So after a little bit, like this is probably time for this to go, but here we are. So you can, there's gunky stuff coming off of here. And then, so what I do with this is I kind of squeeze out the excess after I've left this in here. You can do it for a couple of hours, but you can do it overnight too. It's not really going to hurt it at all. You squeeze out the excess like this. And then all I do is I use Blue Dawn dish soap. I put it on here. I'm like squishing it around in my hand. I have a brush from Purdy's, and it's not the one that has the actual pokey things, but it's like a painter's tool that has the brush on the side. I make sure that I brush it all out, and then I just hang it to dry. It's really easy that way, and then it's ready for the next time. When you go to use it the time after that, you might notice that it's a little stiff. You just kind of work it out a little bit, and then it's totally fine to use. They say you should use your brush like 5 or 6 times. I'm way too frugal for that. So I try to take care of my brushes as much as possible.
So two questions. Is mineral spirits the same thing as the Osmo cleaner?
It essentially is, but it doesn't have, I think it's called the benzo something. It has one less ingredient that makes it smell a lot. So this is actually a lot better for your lungs to use this product because it doesn't have that. Oh, I wish I could remember the name. I cannot think of it, but it doesn't have it, which makes it less smelly.
And then also a question, and I think you're probably covering this next time, but satin, semi, or matte, what's your preference?
Matte all the time. I'm a matte all the way just because I like the mid-century furniture, and I think the matte gives it a nice like clean finish, but I can appreciate satin too. Like satin or the matte matte is like my go-to like 80% of the time. 20% of the time is satin, but I am not a very glossy person. I mean, evidence to the contrary, I am pretty glossy, but not in terms of finish. Did not mean to smash the table that way.
The brushes, are they natural hair or?
Yes.
Yes, natural hair.
Yeah, they're natural hair.
And then do you have any, like, have you ever made your own tack cloths?
Absolutely not. I can get this bag. I found these people at the wood show like a couple of years ago. I don't think oh yeah, here's the bag. Literally, it's from a place called like sandpaper.ca, and these are like the end cuts. So they come in like a longer thing like this. I cut it into like, you can get like 3 or 4 smaller tack cloths out of it. I get this whole bag, and it's like pretty thick when I get it, for $5. So no need to go to any big box stores. If you do have to go to a box store, I recommend trying to stay as Canadian and local as possible. I say Canadian Tire, Home Hardware, even Terpstra Lumber if you're in the like Ontario area. But we like those stores the best. Do we have any other questions? I literally could talk about this for hours. So this is the part where I love, where I get to help, and this is fun. This is where you see all of the hard work of your project pay off, all of the sanding and scraping. I mean, sanding is my favorite part, but so is applying the finish. And when you see it kind of emerge, it is the best feeling to know that you got to do that. So, anything else?
All right. I think that's a wrap.
Amazing. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining part 3. I did put the link to register for part 4 in the chat. So if you scroll up, you can probably find it. So don't forget to sign up for Kristin's last webinar in this series. Will not be her last, I'm sure, with us. But that's happening next Thursday, September 25th.
I
And
hope you enjoy it more than Jack did because he seems to have slept through the entire thing.
he's having to sleep. He's a pro now anyway, because he loves
Yeah.
it so much. So yeah, that's it. I will send out a quick survey. So if everyone can fill that out for us, we would greatly appreciate it. And we will see you next week.
Have a great night, guys. See you later.